Hello and welcome to North Star Conversations with Will Polston. This is episode number 167, and in this episode I'm joined by the incredible Joel Weldon. You're here because you follow your North Star and because you believe in my three coaching principles: absolute clarity, intelligent action and active accountability. And that's exactly the same principles your guest uses in how to communicate. You're already good at what you do, and you know there's still more you can do on your journey, both personally and professionally. One of the most famous high performers in the world of business and finance is Warren Buffett. He's ranked as the #1 investor of all time and is now one of the world's richest men. Warren said you can improve your value by 50% just by learning communication skills and public speaking. That's why I wanted you to meet our special guest, Joel Weldon. Joel is a speaking skills coach and Hall of Fame professional speaker. He is the creator of the ultimate speaking system for entrepreneurs and business owners, as well as executives to speak even more effectively by following one of the most important mindsets ordinary speakers just don't have. If you rated yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on your ability to speak in front of a group made up of your ideal audience members, what would that number be right now? It can be anywhere from 1, which would mean I'm terrified to speak and hate it, to 10, which would be I would love to speak and I'm amazing at it. Wherever you are at on that scale, the mindset that Joel is going to share with you can help you become an even better speaker and communicator. Joel has been paid to speak at over 3,000 events and has personally coached well over 10,000 speakers. He is considered one of the highest performing speakers and speaking skill coaches in America. Please welcome my friend and hopefully the man who's going to help you become an even better speaker, Joel Weldon. Joel, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Will.
It's an absolute honor and a privilege to have you. And this is a very, very special show for many reasons. One is because this is the first ever episode with a guest of what is now known as North Star Conversations. So we're delighted to have you as a guest. And secondly, because you are officially our oldest guest, and I'm sure also going to be one of our best guests as well.
Well, out of 166 previous ones, I guess that's pretty good.
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. So, Joel, you are known around the world as a world-class speaker, but also speaker trainer. Let's just start with, how do you define what a speaker is?
Oh, well, that's a great question, Will. So as you're listening, since you were a little child, you have been speaking. And most children, when they're 2 or 3, they start to be able to have a conversation with their parents. And speaking, normally people think of speaking somebody on a stage in front of a big audience using a microphone. Yes, that is public speaking. But when you use the term speaking or public speaking, the definition is really this: it's a private conversation held publicly, which means if Will and I were alone in his living room, we would be talking and have a conversation. Most people wouldn't say they're speaking. We're having a conversation. However, if Will invited me to his company and we had a live meeting in a hotel with his team members, then there would be a presentation made, and that would be public speaking. But there should be no difference in how you act as if you were in the living room of a friend or on a stage in front of 1,000 or more people. And that's one of the mistakes I see so many speakers make. They think speaking is a performance. It's exactly the opposite. Speaking effectively, communicating effectively is not a performance act. It's a connection act. And one of the things that you see, especially today, where speaking has become so popular because of videos. Anytime you make a video, you're speaking. Anytime you hold a meeting of your team members, you're speaking. Anytime you have a podcast like we're on now, whether you're the host like Will or the guest like me, you're speaking. Being interviewed is speaking. So anytime public speaking then would be 3 or more people. Be Will, Joel, and you. And that would make public speaking. It's a presentation, which means it's got to start somewhere. It's got to end somewhere. And there has to be something in the middle. So you have been speaking for a long time. The question is, how good are you at expressing what is in your heart and in your soul and in your mind to other people? And I'm sure that you've been involved in a conversation and said something like this: I just don't understand what you're saying. Well, that's now an ineffective presentation. It could just be one person. So speaking effectively is something you've done your whole life, and you're going to continue doing it for the rest of your life. And the fact that the career that I've chosen is as a professional speaker and speaking skills coach doesn't differentiate me from you, because you're doing the same thing. Whether you're talking to customers or clients one-on-one, or doing it on a video, or doing it on a webinar or a podcast or an interview, you're speaking. So the first suggestion would be, to be an even better speaker is remember that premise, that it's not a performance, it's being yourself. And that's what I think is so great about you. The time, Will, that you and I have been together, you're always the same. And if I was to find your longest lasting friend that's known you maybe since you were a little kid and you've kept this relationship, and I said to him, hey, tell me what Will is really like, I bet they would say, what you see is what you get with Will. And if you've ever heard that about yourself, what you see is what you get, which means you're congruent, that you're the same. And the conversation Will and I are having now for you on this podcast is the same as when we're at a Genius Network meeting, sitting next to each other and talking. It's not about how you move your body and use your voice. That's acting. And the very definition of an actor, Will, is somebody who has the ability to pretend they're somebody they're not. And as you're listening, whether you're in the UK, India, Australia, Ireland, the US, or and I think you said 127 countries listening, just be you. You're successful now because of who you are. So when you public speak or speak, be you. And that's such an important thing. And the second thing to always think about is make it about your audience. So as you're listening, notice I'm not talking to Will. I'm talking to you. Just you, one person. Now, you might be in India, or you might be in UK, or you might be in Australia or New Zealand or these other 120 plus countries, but it's still about you. And that's the second suggestion. It's a connecting act, not performance. Number two would be, it's all about your audience. So talk to them on a video, on a podcast, on an interview. I'm not talking to Will. Will is here. He's okay. He's going to ask the questions. It's his show. But this message is for you. And I asked him, what does he want to get out of this? And he made everything about you, what you want to get out of this, and why you're investing your valuable time to be on his podcast. That North Star concept. And I love that new change, North Star conversations, that makes such a difference. So does that answer that first question?
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And I think, and the reason I wanted to start with this is because, as you rightly said, so many people, they think of public, oh, I'm not a public speaker, I'm not on stage, I don't need to speak. But when you then think, right, well, pretty much everybody listening to this is having a conversation with at least one person a day. And I know you said sort of 3 people, whether it's your family, whether it's your team, whether it's your clients, whoever it might be, you're having those conversations. Now, I just want to sort of cast, because has it been 50 years that you've been speaking now? Are you quite at 50
Exactly
yet?
50 years. I got my first paid speech in 1974.
And it's been over 3,000 since. But what you would think, for somebody, and so many people are so scared of speaking, and that's one of the things we're going to get onto in just a second, but you would think for the person that spent 50 years of their career professionally speaking and being world-class at it and working with other speakers to become world-class, you would think that the first comment that they ever got from their first ever speaking gig was, "You're really good. You're the best speaker I've ever heard. And you should go and make a real career of this and do this for the next 50 years. But that's not what happened, is it?
No.
What happened?
Well, think about, as you're listening, think about when you started doing what you're doing. Whatever your profession, if you're an entrepreneur and you own a business now and it's a successful business, think of the first business that you had. Maybe when you were a little kid, you started. Were you a super successful person? Did you make $1 million the first year? Probably not. And that's one of the things that you always need to keep in perspective. It's not where you start, it's where you can end up. And when you begin anything, most likely you're not very good at it. If you look at professional athletes, whether it's soccer or basketball, football, baseball here in the US, or cricket over in India, when those players started, they probably weren't very good. But through years of practice and training and mistakes and correcting them and coaching, they got better and better. And now they're at a professional level. And the same thing with speaking. So my background, and this might be helpful for you, because the point of this story is that speaking is a learned skill. And you don't need to be an extrovert, an outgoing, bubbly person to be an effective speaker. I certainly wasn't. You can still be you, and you can learn how to speak. It's a learned skill. And that's what this story proves. So it was early in, well, it was actually September 9th, 1969, that I gave my first talk in front of 17 people. And keep in mind, I had not spoken before. This is the first time. And in 1969, I was 28 years old. And I gave a presentation, and the 17 people left, and I'm packing up. And Will, just imagine that your listener and you were sitting in the room and you didn't leave. But everybody else left and you're sitting there. And then you see the back door open, and one of the attendees comes back in, an older man, much taller than I was, comes up and he says, "Joel, would you like some feedback on that presentation you just gave?" What would you have said as you're listening? First time you've ever spoken, somebody, what would you have said, Will?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I said. So he put his arm on my shoulder and he said these exact words. That was the worst presentation I've ever heard. This is the worst meeting I've ever been to. And you're the worst speaker I have ever heard. Now, if somebody said that to you as you're listening, what would you have done? Well, I started to cry. I mean, the first time out, and I'm getting this terrible feedback. And then he pushes me away from him a little bit and he says, "Stop crying. You're not a baby. You're a grown man. And I'm going to fix you." So I kind of gathered myself together. And I said, "What do you mean, fix me?" He said, "You're going to come to Toastmasters with me Tuesday morning, 6:30. You be there. And I'm going to fix you and teach you how to speak." And that was the turning point of my life. I never talked in high school. 4 years of high school, never stood up in my class, in front of my classmates, and gave a book report or spoke. I was terrified of speaking. I had no confidence. I was shy. And people look at me today and say, "Well, that doesn't seem possible." But look at how you were. Look at the things that you couldn't do in the beginning. I know that you love to play ice hockey, Will. I mean, in England, not many people playing ice hockey. You probably weren't very good when you put on ice skates for the first time. You probably fell before you even got to where you wanted to go. But now you can go backwards and you can play a game while you're on skates. You don't even think about having skates on ice now because you've learned how. And that's what speaking can be for you. And that's what happened in Toastmasters. So I went that September next week to that first meeting and joined. And I never missed a meeting for the next 5 years. And you asked me about my speaking career, that this is the 50th year, because in 1974, I ended up at the World Finals of Toastmasters International in front of 2,000 people out of 9 world finalists and placed in the top 3. And it was written up in the Arizona paper. And imagine you open the paper, it says, young man overcomes fear of speaking, places top 3 in the world of Toastmasters International competition held in Anaheim, California. And they were talking about me, and the phone rings. A guy calls up and he says, I read about you in the paper. We need a speaker for our meeting. Would you come and give a talk to the Phoenix independent garage owners? Now, you could tell this is an old story, Will, because there were garages where they actually used to take care of cars, not a dealership. So I said, sure. And he gave me the information. And then he said, now we got to talk about money. Now, I didn't know what was going on. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, how does $25 sound? Now, remember, this is 1974. And I said to him, well, that's fine. Where do I send the check to? And he says, what are you talking about? We're going to pay you $25. I said, I get $25? He said, yeah, and you get a chicken dinner. Really? He said, well, yes, you're going to be our speaker. And that was my first paid presentation in 1974. And that's how it started, by being told I was the worst speaker he had ever heard. So it doesn't matter where you are now. You can get even better. And there are Toastmasters clubs in every country represented on this podcast, Will. We have over 100 clubs just in the Phoenix area alone in Arizona. And I'm there, still a member, every Monday at noon to Chats Toastmasters in Scottsdale, Arizona, with my daughter, who's also a professional speaker.
Love that. You said, so you can be a speaker, but for somebody to be able to do that, there's something that I think prefaces that, which is to have a can-do attitude, because success comes in cans.
Oh,
right?
You think so? Really? Well, I just happen to have one of those right here in front of me, which is my company logo. And when I started speaking, I wanted a business card that was different. What kind of business card do you have? Most people don't even have business cards anymore. Everything is digital. But this became my business card. Over 500,000 people have this heavy 8-ounce can, most on their desk, as a reminder of what they can do, not what they can't do. So think about that on yourself, that you can be an even better speaker.
So for everyone that's listening to this and not watching this, so Joel just held up a can that says success comes in cans and not cannots. That's about 2/3 of the size of a can of baked beans that is full. I don't know what's in it, but it is full, right? They're
yeah, it's heavy. Well, let me read you the ingredients. It says right here, the ingredients: commitment, courage, faith, goals, imagination, creativity, honesty, persistence, knowledge, defined values, focused thinking, a sense of humor, and a positive I can attitude. Stars, it says, do not open can. Contents ineditable. Only the message on the label is important. And that's what's important for you, that you can do so many, and that's this North Star conversation that you've built, Will, with your podcast, is having that lofty goal, that objective, and keeping you on track and knowing where you're going. And then you never want to stop. Like, I'm never going to retire from speaking and coaching. When you love what you're doing, it's not work. Earl Nightingale, the dean of personal motivation, was my mentor. And he made that statement: work is what you're doing when you'd rather be doing something else. So if you love what you're doing right now, whatever your chosen field is, you're not working. Why would you retire when you love what you're doing? And if you love playing golf more than anything else, then go play golf and be a professional golfer. But don't stop what you're doing because somebody says it's time to retire. Unless there's age requirements, like pilots in the US is 65, and I believe over in the UK it's now 70, then you have to. And I had a friend that was forced to retire from Delta Airlines. So the first thing he did, because he had done very well financially, bought himself an airplane, a jet, and he does charters. And now he's flying more than he ever did as a pilot because he can do it every day if he wants to.
Yeah, love that. That's so
But
true.
he's not going to retire. So
So
does that
true.
make sense, Will?
It absolutely does. I even think so. My little saying is, if you even think of the word retire, it just makes no sense. Why would I do something over and over again to get more and more tired? I'm gonna retire myself every day doing the thing that I don't want to be doing, that doesn't fill me with energy, doesn't fill me with inspiration, doesn't fill me with enthusiasm. It makes no logical sense. So I get it. We're going to come on to what you're doing and why you're still doing it at 82 shortly. But I just want to come back to the speaking side of things for a moment. So there's two other speaking questions that I've got that I think are going to be relevant and helpful for people listening to this. One is, and I'm sure you get this all the time, I'm scared. I'm fearful of what other people might think. I'm petrified to get up and speak in front of people. What is it that people can do, the people that are listening to this right now, that are petrified when they think of speaking to a public audience? How do they get over that?
Well, that's a great question. And it's one that so many people face, because in the US, there's a book of fears. And every year they list the #1 fears of Americans. And always in the top 10 is speaking in front of a group. And Jerry Seinfeld, no matter what country you're in, you probably have heard of this amazing American comedian. He had a wonderful line, and here's what it is. At a funeral, the person giving the eulogy would rather be in the coffin than standing up in front of the group talking. In other words, death would be better than speaking in front of a group. And unfortunately, that's how most people feel that haven't really gotten over it yet. So let me give you a metaphor in the form of a story to show you how you can be so much more relaxed and not fearful when you have to stand up or make a video or a podcast or be interviewed or do a team meeting. So just imagine, and Will, since you're the only one I can talk to and get a response, I'm going to talk to you on this. So Will, just imagine that you're a paramedic. You're a skilled paramedic. You work for a fire department. You're heading to work. And actually, it's not really work. It's a banquet, because you're being honored for some of the good things you've done, and you're wearing your best clothes. And you're driving to this meeting. You're alone in a remote area of England, and you see in front of you an accident had occurred. Cars flipped over, and there's a man laying in the road, bleeding profusely from a leg wound and screaming. Would you stop and help him, Will?
Absolutely.
Now, you would do it even though you're not a paramedic, but let's put you in that role that you're a skilled paramedic. Would you help him? Okay.
Absolutely.
And would you rush over to him? And as you look at the situation, you immediately realize that he's bleeding. You've got to put a tourniquet on. You're just wearing your dress clothes. So you take off your coat, you rip off an arm of your jacket, and you wrap it around his thigh, and you eventually get the bleeding stopped. And then he seems to be okay. You've called the emergency people. The professionals come, take care of him. And you look at yourself, and you're completely covered in blood. Your shoes, your pants, your jacket's ripped because you made it into a tourniquet. When this was going on, did you think, oh, I'm going to get blood on my clothes? Or I'm going to be late for this meeting. Or if I sit down on the road, my shoes are going to get all messed up from this guy's blood is everywhere. Would any of that have been in your mind?
Absolutely not.
You wouldn't have given one thought to it. And the only reason you're thinking of it now is you realize you got to go home and change and be late and still get to the meeting. But at that moment, you were completely devoid of self-focus. All of your mind, energy, and effort was devoted to helping stop the bleeding on this injured person. And that's the mindset that you can have when you speak in front of a group. It's not about you. It's about your audience. Get yourself out of the way. If you're skilled at something, if your expertise is in AI and you're giving a presentation, to people who don't know anything about AI. Start with the premise, it's not about you. It's about AI. It's about what you've learned about your subject that you can convey to these people that will help them use this as a tool and not get trapped into the bad things it can do, but only the good things that it can do. And once you get yourself out of the way, you don't become self-conscious. And when you are nervous, it's because you are self-conscious. Like, how do I look? Is my hair okay? What about my clothes? Will they like me? What if my voice goes? Well, what if I start coughing? What? All of that is self-directed. But if you can put that aside and realize, just like that metaphor of Will being a paramedic, his entire focus, and if you were that paramedic, there would have been no consciousness of yourself. Everything directed towards this person. And that person is really your audience. So that's the kind of mindset that I'm recommending you start to take, that before you make any presentation, whether you're talking to your team, a new monthly meeting that you're having and what the goals are, remember, it's all about them. It's not about you. Unfortunately, ordinary speakers think it's about them. And how do you know that? Because that's all they talk about. I want to do this. I love this. I'm really excited about this. No one cares. It should be, you're going to be so excited about this. You're going to love this next idea. You're going to benefit so much from this. And that's one thing that you can start doing right now. And here's your assignment. Look at an email that you have written to a client. Look at the first two paragraphs. Print it out and circle how many I's and how many U's. If you're like most people, I is the most used word in the English language. And most business emails start off with something, yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing you at the end of the week, and I've got some questions to help me prepare for our discussion, and I really need to know what word is being used. So here's a very practical thing. Always open with the word you somewhere in the first 5 words and no I's. So it could be something like this, based on what I just told you. Your time Friday is important when the meeting occurs. And to make it even more valuable for you, if you could provide some of this information about what your goals are and what your objectives are, it'll make your time so much more profitable and even more focused for you. Okay, there's no I in that opening few sentences. So that's your assignment. Look at a recent email. If you're like most people, you have more than 50% I's over U's. What if you went 90% you and 10% I? There's nothing wrong with saying the word I, but you don't want to make it I. And listen to how ordinary speakers begin. I'm so excited to be here on this podcast. Well, I've been looking forward to it. And, I went to England with my wife on our 50th anniversary, and I had such a good time. And I just love English, but I just love listening to them talk. It's just so elegant. And excited to be part of this North Star conversation. And I hope, what am I talking about? You don't care. You want to know, what does this old guy know? The oldest guy Will has ever had that can help me be an even better speaker and a more effective human being. That's why you're listening. And that's your assignment. No one cares about you. They care, what do you know that can help me do what I need to do? And if you do that, they'll listen to you for as long as you're talking, if it's about them. So that's your assignment. Check I's versus you. Another way of thinking about it is ping pong. Will, have you played ping pong?
I play ping pong.
Okay, which side of the net does the ball go on?
Both sides.
Both sides.
Yeah.
So you can do that. If you say, I, put in some U's. So there I was alone in the desert, lost. I couldn't find the North Star. There were clouds. I didn't know where to go. And then what if you added, if you were in that situation, what would you have done? You can't see the North Star. You don't have a compass. You don't know where the direction is you should be going. What would you do? Well, that's where I was one day. And what I decided to do was there was a trail and I had a 50% chance of going right or left because I didn't know which way the trail was going. Was it going back to civilization or away from civilization? So what would you have chosen? Would you have gone right or would you have gone left? Well, if you said right, that's what I chose. And sure enough, it was the good choice and I find my way back. And you would have done the same thing. So there's a way of telling a personal story, but going back like ping pong. I, you, I, you, I, you. That makes sense, Will?
It did indeed. Yeah. A perfect, very practical tool that people can implement straight away, which is incredible. Another key component of speaking and a skill, exactly as you've nailed it to be, is not confusing people. So many people, they speak, they communicate, but actually their audience misunderstand what they say. So what is it that people can do when they're speaking to ensure that what they want to say lands? Because I got taught years ago, and whether you agree with this or not, the message is always determined by the receiver.
Absolutely. It's 100% correct.
So you've got to be mindful of, has it landed? Do they get it? And that's why sometimes you can have the same message, different messenger, and it lands. So what is it that people can do to ensure that their message is received as it's intended when it comes to
Okay,
speaking?
well, since you do speaking and you in front of different audiences, give me a situation where you have been in front of a group and just tell me a little bit about the group. Who was there? So can you think of some kind of a presentation you gave?
From me,
Yeah.
I can speak of a presentation. So I was speaking at a big event that we did called the Personal Development Event of the Year. And there were a few hundred people in the room, entrepreneurs, business owners in the conference room.
So it was a personal development program. And what was your subject?
I was speaking on mindset.
Mindset. Okay. And you tied into the North Star concept. But mindset in one word would have been the subject. Okay. So as you're listening, whatever your subject is, the first thing you need to know is, who is the audience? So Will has been very clear. This is an audience that is attending an event that's based on personal development, correct? Yep. How they can be better at whatever it is they're doing by working on their mindset, which is what Will is going to focus on. So once you know the audience and your subject, then you can use what we created as the NFV formula, NFV. And those three initials stand for this acronym: needs, fears, victories. So let's start off with needs. Will, you're talking about mindset. What does this audience, made up of people interested in self-development, need to know about the concept of mindset? So one of the things on your list might be, well, they need to know what I mean by mindset. So maybe I should define that. Okay. They need to know what happens when bad things happen. How do they keep a positive mindset? They need to know some examples that this really works. Okay, what does the audience need to know about what your subject is? Second question, fears. Now, fears don't mean terrified like a horror movie. Fears means worried, concerned, or things that might keep them up at night. So one of the fears of an audience made up of people going to a personal development seminar, does this stuff really work? I mean, when things are going good, yeah, a positive mindset works, but when the stuff hits the fan and everything's falling apart, I don't know, does this really work? Or are they just kidding me on this stuff? Or what if I do all the things that these speakers are telling me to do and it doesn't work? What's wrong with me? That could be a fear. And then the victories are, what are the positives or achievements in this area for the audience? Well, if it's a personal development program, one of the victories that you could write down, Will, under your subject of mindset is they showed up to the meeting. They paid their money. They're sitting in the seats. They came to your session. Those would be the positives or their victories. And if you did that, no matter what your subject is, if you're speaking about AI, what do they need to know? Exactly what is AI? Where is it now in its development? How do I access it? What if I'm not familiar with it and I haven't even tried ChatGPT or any of these other AI sites? Where do I even begin? Those are all the needs. Fears. Is this going to overwhelm me? Am I going to be like my children where they're constantly on their phone? Am I going to be searching AI 24 hours a day and it's going to take over my life? Is it going to control the world someday? Making a list of those needs, fears, and victories is the way that you can always connect with an audience, because Will and you listening, there are 6 words you will never hear if you are going to make presentations and speak to others. Will, are you ready for these 6 words? You're never going to hear them. Talk as long as you want. No. Now, if you could, right now, and I'm not sure what time it is in the UK, but it's 9 o'clock in Arizona on a Friday morning. I would imagine if you started at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning talking about everything you know, by next Friday, you could still be talking and still never repeat anything. You have so many stories, examples, metaphors, illustrations, testimony. You have so much knowledge. And as you're listening, you have the same thing. But they give you 10 minutes, or they give you 20 minutes, or this podcast is 60 minutes. How do you know what to talk about? And that's what the NFV formula gives you. And here would be the suggestion, Will, if you could go back to that personal development group, talking about mindset. Number 1, as you look at your list of needs, anything that meets a need, you can talk about. If it doesn't meet their needs, you can't talk about it because they don't need to know it. Fears. Anything that you can share to overcome those fears, worries, and concerns should be in your message. If it doesn't overcome a fear, don't talk about it. And victories. If it reinforces something that they're already good at or already believe in, then you can include it. So when you talk about, I just want to tell you about my ice skating experience. I'm in this league. No one cares. That's what your mindset should be. No one cares about you and your experiences in your life, your family, your children, your hobbies, your interests, unless it can meet their needs, overcome their fears, or reinforce their victories. And that's the key to connection. And Will, I'm sure you have been at meetings, and as you're listening, I can't hear your answer, but I'm going to hear Will's. Have you ever been in a meeting, turned to a stranger next to you and said, what are they talking about? Or where is this going? Or what is this really about? Have you ever had that experience, Will, where you're listening to somebody and you don't have a clue? Because it's not relevant to you. But if you use that NFV formula, it will be relevant. Yeah. And if you start telling the point of what you're going to say before you said it. So I told you the story about 1969 and my first time in front of a group, but I told you the point was that speaking is a learned skill. And it's not where you start, it's where you can end up. Start with the point that's relevant to their needs, fears, and victories, and you've got the audience listening in the palm of your hand because it's about them, not about you. Like that paramedic experience, that metaphor that I shared with you. Will was completely out of himself. He was saving this man, stopping the blood flow by putting a tourniquet on. And no thought for himself, focused on that victim of the accident. And that's the peace of mind that you can have when you speak. It's not about you. And then you eliminate your nervousness and self-consciousness.
Love that. Thank you. Yeah, great answer. And I know I love the needs, fears, victories formula. And that if you're listening to this right now, I'm sure you'll also be running all these ideas through your head of where you can be applying that in your personal, professional environment. Something I want to drill into, this whole podcast is about me getting incredible people to come on, share their North Star, have the conversation around it, what they do, why they do it. And many of the people that I choose to have on as guests are people that are inspired and have been inspired by somebody. I think the best way to be inspiring is to be inspired. You've already mentioned his name once, but there was a book that many people listening to this will know of, they would have heard of, called The Secret. It was written by Rhonda Byrne. It was the first personal development book that I ever read. But there was a slightly different version, something called The Strangest Secret, that I believe had quite an impact on your life.
Yes.
How did that introduction, if that was the introduction to personal development, help shape you and your North Star and the vision and the mission that's meant that you're still doing what you love at 82 years of age?
Okay. Well, think about your own life. And what Will said is so true, that there was somebody in your life that created what we call the domino effect. And I'm sure you've seen videos of college kids that put, 100,000 dominoes on a floor, and then they tip the first domino, and then number 2 and 3, and suddenly hundreds and thousands of dominoes all fall because of that first domino. It's called the domino effect. So you had a domino effect. You didn't start off where you are today. And in many cases, that first domino is a person. We call that name a mentor now. It could have been your parent. It could have been a teacher. It could have been a coach. It could have been a friend. It could have been a complete stranger. But something happened in your life where somebody said something to you, or you read something in their book, and the domino fell. And the next one, and the next one. And you started on your life's journey. And that's exactly what happened to me. So come back in time as my make-believe sibling. I was an only child, but you're going to be my sibling. So you're invisible. You're following me around. And the year is 1967. And I'm a carpenter. I didn't go to college. I didn't do well in high school. How did you do in high school? Did you notice just what I did? I said, I didn't do well in high school. You don't care. Then I said to you, how did you do in high school? That's the ping pong concept. Will is asking me a very personal, directed comment. Who was your mentor, and how did it happen, and what happened? So it's got to be I directed. I can't say, so imagine you're a carpenter. Well, you weren't a carpenter. But I just made you my invisible sibling, and you're going to come along on this journey. Now you're part of the story. That's what you could do when you tell a personal story. Put your audience in the story. So as you're watching me making $62 a week doing hard labor, so you times that by 50 weeks, that's just a little over $3,000 a year in 1967. And then one Sunday after church, a friend comes up named Vernon Cavill, and he says to me, Joel, why don't you come and work for me? I know you're a carpenter. Why don't you come work for me? And I pay a commission. And I didn't know what, I'd never heard that word commission before. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, we pay you what you're worth. Well, I didn't like that right away because I didn't think I was worth very much. How much did you think you were worth? I mean, I was 26 years old. I hadn't done anything. I'd been banging nails, digging ditches, physical labor. inability to communicate, shy and self-conscious. And now he's asking me to get paid for what I'm worth. I don't think I'm worth. I said, doing what? He said, selling World Book encyclopedias door to door. If somebody said that to you, Will, that you can't even talk to people you know, can you imagine being a door-to-door salesman? But he made it sound so good. He showed me these books, this World Book encyclopedia, and I knew if I had had something like that, maybe I would have been more interested in school. Maybe I would have done better, but my mother never knew about it, and we were poor, but she probably would have found the money because she wanted me to be happy and successful, but she just didn't know how to do it. So I ended up just being a carpenter. But I said yes. And I set a company record, shy and self-conscious, knocking on doors, and I made 1,200 sales calls in 4 months and one sale. So not a very good closing percentage if you're in sales. 1,200 calls, one sale. And when I turned in this one sale to Vernon Cavill, my manager, he said, tell me how you make it. I said, well, she wanted to buy it and just gave me the money. Oh, so you didn't even make a presentation? I said, no. He said, you are the worst salesman I have ever seen. I've been doing this for 22 years. You're the worst salesman I have ever seen, and you have the worst attitude of anybody I've ever met. And you're never going to make it dealing with people. And then, Will, he said one word, unless. And he paused. Unless you change the way you think about yourself. And I said, well, how do I do that? He said, I don't know. But maybe, just maybe, this record will help you. And he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a record called The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. And he hands it to me, and I said, well, Mr. Cavill, I don't dance. He said, no, it's not a singing record. It's a talking record. And it's the largest selling recording in the history of the record industry of a spoken word message. And now, in 2024, it still is. The Strangest Secret. And you can see a video of it on YouTube. There's so many copies available. Earl Nightingale's Strangest Secret, which was the precursor to The Secret that you mentioned, that book. And unfortunately, they never even give Earl credit. But he started the whole personal development industry in 1955 when he made that recording. And in 1967, it ended up on my record player, listening to it that night. And I can remember hearing those words for the first time and never hearing anything like that in my whole life. And that was the domino that fell. And what The Strangest Secret was, in short form, simply the statement, which is the basis of everything in your North Star conversations, Will, is that you become what you think about. And when he mentioned that and gave examples, I realized here I was, 26 years old. What had I been thinking about? I thought about all the things I couldn't do. I didn't think about what I could do. I thought about what I couldn't do. If anybody told me that in 1974, I'd have a can that says success comes in cans and I'd be a speaker, I said, that's impossible. I couldn't lead my Sunday school class in silent prayer. I mean, that's bad. And as you're listening, you might think, well, I'm not that good at what I'm doing. It doesn't matter where you are now. It's where you can go that makes the difference. So I listened to that recording for a whole week over. I never left the house. I listened to it. I made notes. And then I made a decision. I'm going to learn how to sell this World Book Encyclopedia. Then I'm going to go get a real job. And after a week of listening, I went out in the same territory with the same product at the same price and made 4 presentations and 2 sales by noon. And in 4 hours, doubled 4 months of effort, doubled it, and made 2 sales in 4 hours. And I had an old beat up Volkswagen with a crack, Will, in the rearview mirror. And I pulled the mirror down. I look, I said, I did it. I did it. Then I tried to think, what did I do? Same product, same territory, same price. different way of thinking. I kept thinking, if my mother had seen these books, if I was that child in this home, how much better these kids will do in school. I didn't know how to sell. I didn't understand closing, handling objections, adding value, none of that. But I was so excited about the product, and people caught that excitement and bought it. And by the end of that first year, I'd become the #1 salesperson for Vernon Cavell out of over 1,100 people that he managed, including the first 4 months of only one sale. I was unstoppable. What about you? Do you feel that you're unstoppable? Has the dominoes started to fall? But if you take that story and realize the truth of that strangest secret, that you will become what you think about. What did you wake up thinking this morning? About all the challenges you have ahead and how difficult it is, and the economy isn't very good, and inflation is taking over, and this person canceled yesterday, and who's going to cancel today? Or are you thinking in cans and not cannots? If somebody ever told me the day he handed me that record, that not only would I become a professional speaker for over 50 years, and that my mentor would be the man who was on that record. And when I invited him on my houseboat that I had just purchased in 1987, he was the first guest, was so impressed with this Arizona experience. He sold his homes in Florida and California, moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, and for the next 3 years until 1989, he was my mentor. And he died just 3 years after he got here. His wife is still a good friend. I just talked to her last week, and we still stay in touch. But how is that possible? Because in your life, the dominoes start to fall by one thing happening: that first mentor, that book, that experience. The podcast maybe that you're listening to today will move you to be an even better speaker, because it's not about you. It's a learned skill, and you can be yourself. So does that answer your question, Will?
It does indeed. I knew that you had listened to the recording. I'd heard you say you'd been mentored by him. I didn't know that you had that close a relationship to the point where he even moved and up sticks because he'd come and spent time with you. That's incredible. I wish I could grab it. Unfortunately, it's just down there. So the Strangest Secret, I've listened to dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and I now have a little booklet of it that I
Well,
bought
it's
recently.
probably, not only is it the most powerful single message, but there is not a fat comma. Somebody once said that. In Earl's material, there's no wasted words.
No.
There's no distraction. It's so clear. And that's what I learned as a speaker, how he thought and how he was able to capture ideas and present them. And if you listen to Earl Nightingale's material, there's nothing about himself. When he moved here, when he came on my houseboat, I didn't know anything about him except one thing. He had been a soldier in World War II, and he liked boats. But there were no stories about him, nothing about him, because he knew it wasn't about him. It was about his listeners.
Yeah.
And that formed that mindset.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were still speaking. So what I want to, you said about being a first domino. You're world-class at speaking. People listening to this right now are thinking, I want my Earl, but I want his name to be Joel. I want my first domino to be Joel, that can help me become a better speaker, communicate my message, to make it about the audience and not about me. How can people find out more about you, connect with you? How can they do that?
Well, you just go to my website, which is ultimatespeaker.com. ultimatespeaker.com. And we have a program I created, over 200 videos and audios and printed materials on speaking, and examples of all of these things and content that you can use when you speak without giving me any credit. So that's available. And then our other option is we have group coaching with Jenny, who's my youngest daughter and partner. My oldest daughter runs our business. So my two children are involved, and my wife ran the business until her passing a couple of years ago. But we had 59 years of wonderful marriage together. And the result, of course, is my children and grandchildren, all because of her. So it's a family operation. So we do group coaching calls, and then I work with a few entrepreneurs every month on a one-on-one basis, and a very unique coaching program. You're a coach, you know this. So my coaching program, thanks to Earl Nightingale, because one of my fishing trips with him, he told me, he said, Joel, you want the secret of being a success at anything? I said, sure. Find out what everybody else is doing and don't do it. Don't compete, create. I said, what do you mean? He said, that's exactly what I mean. Look at what people are doing and don't do what they do. If you do what they do, you're going to be in the same box as they are. Create your own box. So my coaching program is so different. You hire me, you pay me once, we don't count hours, we don't count time, and you have me forever. Now, there's nobody else I know that's doing that. You might say, well, that's crazy. Well, it's not crazy. You make a one-time investment and you have me. So that's why I only take a few new people every month. And over 200 Genius Network members have hired me over the last 10 years of being a member of that amazing group that you and I met at and that you're still part of. And Joe Polish being one of them. And Martha McSally, who you just had recently on one of your podcasts, is my client, and I help her with all her speaking as well. So those are the two options, but you can, and there's a lot of things you can listen to on that website. So just check out ultimatespeaker.com. And if you want to talk about it, you can get on my calendar and we can have a conversation. So that's how you can take it to that next level.
For ease, because I know there'll be people going, I've got to jump on this. I need to find out more. We're going to put the link in the show notes, so people can head straight to your website and go and find out more. So two other things I want to talk about before we look at wrapping up. One, which is, you asked me right at the beginning before we started filming, well, what we were talking about what North Star conversations are about, and there's a part of the Strangest secret. There's so many of so much of the recording, which is about 30 minutes long, that stick out. But one of them is how Earl Nightingale defines success. He says success is the progression of a worthy ideal. And that I just love, because success is so subjective. But for me, having a North Star is having a mission in life that's the equivalent of trying to empty the sea with a spoon. It's something that guides you, you can focus on, you can forever be moving towards it. And that's the key. For as long as you're moving towards it, you're progressing, and doing it in a way that creates a life that you love, that has what I call the ripple effect, something that benefits not only you, but your family, your friends, your community, society, humanity, the universe. That for me is what it's about. And with the work that you do, Joel, you're having that impact in so many ways. But you also make time for you. You know, I know there's over 60 days a year. You're speaking with people, you're working with people one-on-one. You've done something that nobody else does, which is literally you pay me once and you work with me forever. So you've got a lot of clients that you're looking after at any one time, albeit they're not all working with you, but you still make 60 days a year where you're out doing the things that you love at 82 years old. Skiing, water skiing. Am I right in saying you're like a champion water skier? Is that right?
Well, no, I'm not a champion. I don't compete. That's what Earl Nightingale taught me. He said, don't compete, create. So yes, I have owned a private water ski lake for 35 years almost, an hour from our home in Scottsdale. And we have 21 homes on 2 lakes. And matter of fact, tonight I'm leaving for the weekend to go out there and ski with some of my friends who are, well, they're 2 lawyer students, one from the University of Wyoming, one from Arizona State, and they're in their 20s, and their dad, who's in his 40s. And those are the people I hang around with. So we're going to ski on Saturday.
Incredible. You are the definition of a man living a life that he loves. by following his North Star. Many of the people listening to this as well, they're very health conscious, and they are looking to optimize in all of the areas of life. And you and I sat down 3 months ago, and we were doing a sharing exercise, talking about what's the thing that's had the biggest impact in the last year, and we were sharing that with each other. And I shared with you that I had taken a hiatus from sugar, and I was really proud of myself because I had gone, I think it was 52 days or 51 days of not having added sugar, and saying it was one of the best things I had done last year. And you agreed. You said, I'm not having sugar is a incredible thing. But you'd done it a little bit longer, and there had been another domino that had been an impact, somebody else, and another mentor, I suppose you might call it, that had an impact for you as well. And the reason I want you to share this story, the point of this for everybody listening, is because Joel is the living example of somebody that's living a life that he loves. He's doing incredible things. He's got a mission that inspires him, that makes a difference and has the ripple effect. But you've also made a conscious decision to look after
tell the point of the story. I want you to listen how I'm going to include you in the story, even though you and I have never met, as you're listening. So the point of this story is what happened that got me to stop eating sugar, change the way I eat and everything that I drink. And to give you a little teaser, it happened with a complete stranger on an airplane flying from Miami Beach, Florida to Dallas, Texas. And what happened has impacted my life since 1981. Are you ready for the story? So here's a way you can tell a personal story. Why don't you come along with me as my invisible partner? You and I just stepped off the stage for IBM at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach after a 2-hour seminar. You come up to my room. You don't go in the bathroom, but you see me go in the bathroom, drop into the bathtub of hot water, and I'm sitting in there for a half hour trying to get my energy back. I'm exhausted. And sitting in that bathtub, eating a giant semi-sweet chocolate bar. Get dressed. You and I head to the airport, hop on an American Airlines plane from Miami to Dallas, Texas, in first class. My seat is 1A. You're invisible. You're going to come. You can sit on my lap because you're invisible. Nobody will see you. And some guy sits down next to us in 1B. And the plane takes off. And the flight attendant says, as she sees me working on these feedback cards, these green index cards where the audience has critiqued me and given me feedback on the presentation, which is one other valuable thing that you should think of. Ask your audience to rate you on a 1 to 10 scale and tell you the best idea they got. And what would they think would have made it even better when you were speaking to them? And that's how I ended every presentation. So I was looking at these hundreds of cards on my table. Flight attendant says, we're going to serve dinner soon. Please take that off. So I take it off. She comes a couple of minutes later. Now, this is 1981, Will. First class on airplanes with real silverware and knives. We haven't had all these hijackings yet and security issues. And as this beautiful tray with linen tablecloth and napkin is put on my tray in front of me, big steak, big glass of Pepsi, which is all I drank, and a big piece of chocolate layer cake and the salad. And the smoke in 1A, which is the bulkhead, is now coming from row 3. If you're young, you don't remember that airplanes had smoking. And on American Airlines, their jet was 3 rows of first class. Row 3 was smoking. Row 1 and 2 was non-smoking. But how far is 1 from 3? I mean, they're right there. And you got a bulkhead. And for some reason, the circulation system was throwing the smoke against the bulkhead. And have you ever sat on an airplane and made a comment to the person next to you without talking directly to them, but they know you're talking to them because there's nobody else that can hear you? Have you ever done that, Will? Just kind of made, oh boy, it's hot, or, boy, it's late, or I hope we don't get delayed, or whatever. So I made this statement, and Will, you can verify that you're hearing it. Oh man, boy, that smoke is really bad today. Now, the man next to me in 1B has not said a word. Excuse me. I haven't said a word to him except that. And he says, in this tone, and I know you're an Englishman and a fine gentleman, but this tone was this: not as bad as that crap you're about to eat. And that's all he says. Now, if somebody said that to you as you're listening, complete stranger, you got this beautiful plate, first-class food, what would you have said? Well, what would you have said?
Are we talking about the same food?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I said, what do you mean? So he says, do you really want to know? I said, yeah. He said, do you like rolls? I said, yeah. And he reaches across and he grabs the roll and he picks it up in his hand and he holds it right in front of my face and he squeezes it. And he says, this roll is made with white flour. Rats don't even eat white flour. It's crap. And he threw it on the floor. Then he picks up the butter. He said, you're not going to eat that. Were you going to put butter on there? I said, yeah. He said, there's no butter in here. It's chemicals. Crap. How about the salad? You going to put salad dressing on? Picks up the little salad dressing. He said, read that. There's nothing in here but chemicals. It's crap. He threw it on the floor. And now you're drinking poison. That glass, Pepsi, is that what's in the Pepsi in that glass? I said, Pepsi, yeah. He said, it's made out of sugar. It's pure sugar. You drop a baby's tooth in there, it'll dissolve it. And you're drinking that? That's crap. And now that steak, you're going to eat that steak? I said, yes. He said, by the way, what's your name? I said, Joel Weldon. He said, my name's Alvin Casuto. He said, do you want me to continue or you want me to stop? I said, what would you have said? Well, he's throwing your food on the floor. He's yelling at you almost, but he's not in a loud volume, but in a kind of an aggressive tone. And I was almost intimidated not to say, you keep going. And then he says, it's your mother's fault. I said, now he's talking about my mother. I said, what about my mother? Since she wanted you to be a big, strong boy, you got to eat meat. You don't have to eat meat to be big and strong. What's the biggest, strongest animal you know? I said, an elephant. He said, you ever see an elephant eat a steak? I said, no. He said, they eat vegetables, fruit, leaves. You can eat fruit and vegetables. Sure, you can have fish and lean chicken and lean meat maybe a little bit, but you don't want to eat a steak like that. And then about chocolate cake, are you going to eat that chocolate cake? I said, well, that's my favorite. It was 7-layer chocolate cake. I can still see it, even though this was 1981. He says, poison. And then he says, now, Will, I don't want to be insensitive to our political times that we live in today, but this was 1981. So he says, put your hand on my stomach. I said, what? He said, don't worry, I'm married. Put your hand on my stomach. So it was like a steel plate. He said, I'm in magnificent physical condition. He said, how old are you? I was just 40 years old. I said, I'm 40 years old. He said, I'm a lot older than you. I used to be just like you. I was eating crap. I was drinking Pepsi and Coke. I was loading up with sugar. But I met a man who told me it was crap. And now I only drink water. I have not had sweets in years, no candy cookie or ice cream. I eat chicken and fish. I have a bag under the seat with my food in it. And then I've got fruit and vegetables. And I'm going to go play tennis with kids half my age, and I'm going to run them off the court because no one can keep up with me because I'm in magnificent physical shape. And you're not. He said, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a professional speaker. And he said, did you speak today? I said, yeah. He said, for how long? I said, 2 hours. He said, you look tired. Are you tired? I said, yeah, I'm tired. How do you get tired talking for 2 hours? I talk all day long. I don't get tired. I'm a lawyer. I earn my money speaking. You earn your money speaking. How do you get tired speaking for 2 hours? You know why? Because you're eating crap. You're drinking poison. Why don't you try it just for a couple of days? Try it for a week or two. And Alvin Cassuto gave me his business card. And for 10 years, on the anniversary of March 16th, I would write him a thank you note telling him, Alvin, I'm still on the plan. No sweets, drinking only water, chicken and fish, a little bit of lean meat. Thank you. Within 2 days of stopping all of that crap I was eating, my energy soared. And for over 40 years, it hasn't changed. Not a single piece of processed sugar has passed my mouth that I know of. Now, I mean, I avoid anything with candy, cookie, or ice cream cake, none of that. But sometimes maybe there's a little bit of sugar. I'm sure there's some in some of the things I use, like I sometimes put ketchup on my hamburgers, but only water, nothing since March 16th, 1981, but water, fruit and vegetables, chicken and fish, lean beef, and exercising daily. And my life changed forever. I'm sure I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for Alvin Cassuto. Another domino. So when you listen to that story, you might be saying it's willpower. Or this guy is just he's just got such determination. No, it has nothing to do with that. So let me give you one other example, but this is so powerful as you're listening. And Will, you're going to be my answerer. How much is 2 plus 2?
4.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
You're sure. When you were a little boy growing up in England, someplace, you had a school teacher or a parent or a brother or sister that showed you math. And at some point in your life, you didn't know that 2 plus 2 was 4. Would you agree with that?
Yep.
But somehow in your early life, maybe between the ages of 2 and 5, Will learned that 2 plus 2 was 4. And at that moment, you had an epiphany. You saw it. And now, I won't ask you your age, but many years later, when I said to you, is 2 plus 2 4? You said yes. I said, are you sure? Absolutely. Do you have unshakable faith that it is 4? Will?
Yes.
Is there anything I could say that would convince you it's not?
No.
No. You know that you know. Now, let me ask you this. Did you wake up this morning and say, I've got to look at the math table in case Joel asked me an addition question? Okay, so 2 plus 2 is 4, 3 plus 3 is 6. I better go over them a couple of times. No, the moment you know it, you got it. And that's what happened on March 16th. I started there. By March 18th, I knew that what I was doing was going to change I just felt so much better in 2 days. And I thought, what if I could feel that way every day? And it's not stopped. In 43 years, I wake up every morning full of energy. Nothing hurts and everything works. That's the motto. And that can be for you too. Stop eating crap. Try drinking water and see what happens to you. And if you get it, like you have done with sugar, you have now seen that 2 plus 2 is 4. However, if you said, well, I still miss this, I just miss this kind of sweets. I got to have my strawberry shortcake, or I've got to have my apple pie, or whatever it is that turns you on in the sweets department, then my answer is you haven't seen that it's 4. You think it still could be 5, and some days it may be 6 or 3. It's usually 4, but not every day. But if you see clearly, you have unshakable faith, It is not discipline. It is not willpower. It is knowing what's true for you. And we could call that your North Star.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Joel, you have been a phenomenal guest, and I'm extremely grateful to have you on the show. For everyone that's been listening to this, what I'd love you to do is, there are so many takeaways that you may have taken from this. So we've also just rebranded as part of this process with North Star Thinking. We've got over 5,000 people in our Facebook group. And I would love for you to come and join the new Facebook group. It's called the North Star Thinking Community, and share what's been your biggest takeaway from this conversation that you've taken from Joel. What is it you're going to do? Are you going to take him up on his invitation to do the exercises that he was mentioning earlier? What is it that you're going to do and apply? Because Joel said earlier, it's about thinking differently and having a different way of thinking. But I believe in, if you think differently, you act differently. And if you act differently, you get different results. But if you don't act differently, you won't get the results. So what is it you're going to do? What's the action that you're going to take as a result of this particular episode? And go and share that in the Make It Happen community. Do that. So not Make It Happen community, sorry, that's the old name. North Star Thinking Community on Facebook. Go and share that there. Joel, any final comments?
Well, yes, based on what you just said. So imagine it's a month from now and you wake up and you've got all this energy. Why? Because you stopped eating crap. You're drinking only water. You're thinking in positive terms. You've learned that speaking is a connection act, not a performance act. You've told the point of your story before you tell a story. You make it about your audience, not you. You focus more on the word you than the word I. And you've done all those things and you feel wonderful about speaking in front of a group. Your nerves are gone because you realize it's about them and not you. And then you've learned 22 words about being an even better speaker. And if I was to sum up everything for you in just 22 words, here they are. Speak to your audience about what they need in an organized way they can follow, and get yourself out of the way. Will?
Love that. Love that. Thank you so much. And such a powerful statement to finish on. So Joel, it's been a pleasure having you as my guest. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And then everyone that's been listening,
make it a great day.
Indeed. And for everyone that's been listening, until next time, live a life you love.